waves coming, of course, and you can feel the wind as it pushes wind ahead of it. Well, I have about a 20-minute wait before I can get inside the grounds of the British Museum at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock they actually open up the doors, but you can go inside and sit probably in a cafe, I think. So I've backed off down one of the side streets to one of the many little shops, this is one. We have some tea. And read my guidebook before I go. The entrance to the British Museum, and impressive in its, I guess, Roman or Greek, I don't know, architecture. This is the great court that you enter into around to the left, from which the exhibit halls are off of. And to my right, waiting till 10 o'clock to get in, is the Egypt, Syria, and Babylon area. Apparently this was an area unused until 2000, when I'm guessing that this this covering was installed, or it may have been installed even before that, as the implication of the guidebook. Just for interest's sake, I will pan around slowly. I'm standing in front of the Rosetta Stone inside of the building for Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonian. But the guidebook is cynically careful enough to point out that these treasures of the British Museum are in fact the things that were stolen from other countries around early 1800s, including the Elgin marbles, which we'll see later. This is a black granite sarcophagus. Notice the detail out of granite. Ramesses II. This is the goddess, I don't know how you spell it, how you pronounce her, twerp or something like that, but I believe it was a hippopotamus that was protector of, I think, of children, a large pendulous breast. And this is the god Troth, the clever baboon. I wonder if that's synonymous with the Anastasi's clever coyote, and the Tlinket's raven. This huge piece of stone gives some sense of the size, not to mention the massive weight of a sarcophagus. Not to mention the cost of hollowing that puppy out, plus all of the hieroglyphics on the side. This close-up is because the statuary seems to be so smooth, so delicate. Certainly the body is delicate, but the stone is so smooth. This is a kilt. Notice the detail of it. This is an offering table. But what's interesting is notice the groove through the center, and that tracks from around the sides a bit, very much like you'd find a carving platter today, as the trench being, or the groove being, for moving the juices or blood away from the table. This is a miniature stele, if you will, giving the history of something. Look at the precision of the drawings, like the bird right there. You can't get close enough to it in a different way, but imagine the man who carved this. Probably was a man. If only he could have known that history would preserve his work. And this is the god Ammon, the ram, the powerful ram, with the pharaoh, or the important personage, underneath his chin, symbolizing the protection of the pharaoh by this god. Stela, I think Spanish stele, but notice the color still remaining on this one. These are made of limestone, relatively easy to cut, but easy to deteriorate too, but still the color remains. And one can imagine that the symbols, as well as the language, was understood by the people who, at least at a higher echelon, don't know the level of education in early Egypt. I hesitate to go too far in describing the attributes of this particular stele, although they seem patently obvious. The colossal scarab. This was a shrine for Ptolemy VIII and his wife. It once held a statue of a god, and it had doors on it. These are Roman terrazzo, or paving art, if you will, that people would use for their homes. These were all taken by the British at one point in time to be brought here. You can see by the sheer size of these and their beauty how they're the equivalent of Oriental rugs in our society. And it's interesting to see the detail in this portraiture of tile. These are the painted coffins that normally, I believe, were then placed inside of stone. Coffin and then inside of a tomb. Now this mummy case is not only painted, but it's gilded with gold. I wonder if the deceased or the soon-to-be deceased would have seen these in advance. These were fertility figurines thought to enhance fertility both before death and after death. This, if I can record it, is an X-ray of the mummy that we'll see in a minute. Notice how they could never, the Egyptians, as powerful as they were in their context, imagine a concept of X-ray. What can we not imagine today? The easy recreation of a human being from their cells, including a recreation of all their memories that would have died. That's the part that sounds bizarre. It would not an X-ray have sounded bizarre to them. The guidebook suggests that the hieroglyphics on these burial devices were both a record of what the person's life had been about, and also the passwords for getting past the guards of eternity. But imagine the planning that went into this. And notice this one. This panel can only be read by a person looking from the head to the toe. Perhaps the person inside was thought to be the only person who needed to read this panel. A particularly ornate gilded one. I'll turn the camera so the perspective is better. These are wooden models of industries probably important to the continued existence in the afterlife of the pharaoh or of the personage buried. And apparently these figurines were actually covered in realistic clothing on the assumption they would need such clothing. In this case is Ginger, a 5,400-year-old man, called because of a wisp of hair that was red, and it presumably has a flint piece next to his arm, but I don't see it. These basket coffins were the earliest attempt that we know of, apparently, to preserve a body. Obviously it was not successful. The flesh is gone. And these were, of course, precursors to the wood in coffins of the Egyptian pharaohs that were then placed in rock coffins, again for the purpose of protecting the existing body. Okay, this in fact is the burial grave of Ginger. And there you can see the blade, cutting blade to the right, the various forms of pottery buried. What an irony if in future technology this corpse can be brought back to existence, including its memories. It was found in this fetal position. These are examples of Assyrian seals used in the merchant trade. So you would have had this little cylinder. Imagine the artisans who created this. And then you would roll that into clay, and it would give evidence of who you were, like a signature ring. This particular tablet is a man writing to his brother complaining that he and his family have been left in Ashur without food, clothes, or fuel, although winter has already come. He ran short of space to write, and therefore the second little tablet, if you will, above, where he added additional notes. How would he feel if he knew that thousands of years later humans were still reading his message to his brother? Babylonian farm instruments. This is thought to be the Queen of the Night, a Mesopotamian goddess. I just think the detail is fascinating of the wings. And here are the owl feathers. Notice her clawed feet. These are a representation of, I guess, and may even include all of the artifacts that were in the tomb that a woman named Kenyon in 1952, an anthropologist, discovered. These are found at the bottom of shafts, and apparently the unique feature about them is that because of those shafts and their depth, these were protected, and even that which was prone to deterioration, like flesh and so forth, was to some degree maintained, as well as baskets and things like that, wood and leather.
The baby sisters, yeah, they're in one of the other countries outfits. And later there was 5 children, and they've got a detached double garage and two-story extension. And people just around collect not round it, and also just extend the duck right round the back. Well, I think you get lots of earache with people who don't step back. And the rules of conservation are you have to
beautifully fluted column. I have no idea what its relevance is. example of the god Amun, represented by the ram, the powerful ram. These are gates. This is the recreation of the Pantheon, because what is in the room to the left, called the Pantheon galleries, is the frieze that was taken off from around the original building here on the inside, not the pediment up at the top. What we'll see inside here are the frieze. They're called the Elgin marbles because he's the person who borrowed them from the Greeks. And of course, the controversy rages on. The Greeks demand them back, and the British say, had it not been for us, someone else would have stolen it. And you'd have none of it, nor way of seeing it. The first part of the frieze depicts the preparation, as you would have even at the rodeo. There's a young boy or someone adjusting the tunic of someone, and now they're on their horses. Notice the detail in the veins in the horse's stomach, and also in the legs. And notice the holes up on top were for brass reins that were designed to give the frieze more exciting and realistic view. And this depicts the girls who are entering in with, looks like musical instruments in their hands, although this one looks like she has a wine jug. I think that's what that is there. You wonder why only portions are here. Were they just lost at the time of dismantling and the destruction that may have occurred? And here the robe which is going to be presented to Athena, the goddess. And this is the Zeus, the god of gods, and his wife Hera. But just a quick pan to show how long this frieze was. You can see it on both sides. And, going quickly, at both ends of this building. These apparently portray the epic battle between the centaur, probably a god, and man. It looks like man is the one who's going to lose, but I don't know how the story turns out. This side is the east pediment, and you can see that it's a pediment in the sense that the horse was the corner, the right corner, and then the pediment went up at a triangular angle, of course. Notice the detail in here. Even now. And somewhere in the middle here, it would have risen to its peak, and then fallen off again to the far corner. And some of the detail, like right in there next to his hip, you couldn't see that from the ground, yet the attention seems to be the same. But all done out of rock, which is so remarkable when you look at sculptures. This is a metope. Don't know about the pronunciation. The centaur is exultant in victory, while the lapith, apparently the name of a group, lies defeated, probably dead. And the difference in their postures, the dead man obviously in infinite repose, and the centaur. In this metope, the centaur has suffered the fatal blow to his back and is clutching at it, while the lapith administers the final killing blows. This is interesting, not just because of the drama of the lapith striking a blow at the centaur, but because the heads, which are missing, are in Athens. By what circumstance did they manage to hold on to those? These heads are now in Copenhagen, whatever the story. A water jug the centaur is about to level on the head of the lapith. In this picture, the lapith forces the centaur to the ground. Anyone who knows anything about horses knows you ain't doing that. Their haunches, their back end is so powerful. It's unlikely that a human being could pull one of them down, but such is mythology. The purpose of the frieze seems to be almost directly analogous to the storyboard in the Tower of London jewels that illustrated all of the people in the coronation of somebody. That was looked like a line drawing, whereas this is in stone, but same idea it seems like. The frieze was probably like a short video clip that we could use today to illustrate the time flow and events. The time flow of events. Certainly some kind of battle scene. Best illustrating the grotesqueness of hand-to-hand combat in those days as opposed to our antiseptic smart bombing approach. This is interesting, not just from its example of the pottery technique, but because it's a wine cooler. It floated in a bigger pot of cold water. Perhaps a variation on the evaporation approach to cooling something. These were mirrors, probably of brass. The kouros is an idealized version of, or compromise, if you will, or balance between man and the gods, who the Greeks believed were in the form of man. Presumably these include defects also, which are common, but it would take a scholar to know what that would be. This is a mirror of a woman holding a dove, and I'll go off to the side just a bit so we can see that. Maybe get a closer look at some of that detail. This amphora, or however you pronounce Amphora, depicts Achilles killing the Amazon woman with a stab through the neck. I think most of this is gold. It could be brass, but there's an allusion in the descriptions to some of it being gold, if not all of it. I don't know how much of the detail I can get, but I'll move over here. Perhaps a ring, looks like it, or a pin of some sort. Those were dress pins, perhaps to hold the dress in position. These are some of the earliest examples of coins, or at least what remains of them. I can't interpret the wording, what it means. I would guess that all of these jugs reflect Greek mythology elements. Maybe they were also just day-to-day events depicted. Imagining the person who used this having the foresight to think that it might end up in a museum. What is it of ours that we can imagine might end up in such a place, and what would that place be like? And why would the item we're holding be of interest to the future? This is interesting as the artwork is inside the bowl. These are Mycenaean hunting and war implements. Apparently the Mycenaeans were characterized by that. And these, they're jugs, not as, in this form, as dramatic, let's say, as because if this is that clay that has a little bit of whitening in it, as was described somewhere else, that whitening can wear off relatively easily. So perhaps that has happened as a result of their choosing this style. These are early Minoan burial devices. This one apparently made to look like a house. This curious device is a Cycladic period multiple cluster vase. This pot with an upturned leaf. Here, another entry gate piece of a lion. It looks like cuneiform, not only on the wall behind the lion, but on the haunch of the lion. Show you what they looked like when they were brand new.